Well, here we are, Peter, back again. One of our most favourite environments, the great outdoors, among the trees, some hills, a river beside us. It doesn't get much better than this. And over the years, we've shared so many stories of our adventures that we've been very fortunate to have. Certainly for me, over the last 10, 15 years, and heading off to places like Asia and Africa and Kilimanjaro and Russia and places like that, and some amazing adventures, and you sharing your stories of your alpine technical climbs, etc. has been fantastic. But something that we've shared and we share a passion for, we talked about every time we meet practically, and we meet outdoors quite a lot, is the analogy and the comparison that we've drawn over the years between our experience on the mountains and in the mountains and on adventure travel, and our experience on the adventure of life and business. And I'd love to chat to you and share. We can share a couple of those today. Maybe you just give us a couple of examples of adventures you've been on and what you've taken from those.
Well, it's hard, Shay, there's so many of them, and you know this, and we've talked about this many times before.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention one that comes to mind, and again, I've mentioned this one to you before, maybe one or two. One, and it's one that's actually been a kind of like it's been my aim for the last number of years. It's a thing called the Piz Badil. It's a mountain on the Swiss-Italian border, and there's the north face in the Piz Badil. It's one of the great north faces in the Alps. Now, I haven't tried to climb the north face, but I have tried to climb the north ridge. It's nearly as long. It's not quite as hard, but it's a very, very committing climb. And I've tried to climb the north ridge of the Badil. I've actually lost count, maybe 6 times at this stage, but I've never quite got it. Never got it right.
So, and what from that experience, from your 6 times in 6 attempts, what are the things, or what are maybe 1 or 2 key points that you've taken away, that you've applied or drawn upon in life or in business, Peter?
There's two, Shay, that come to mind, right? One is that doing something big like that, you don't necessarily get it right first time. As I say, I've gone out to look at it 6 times, and every time I've gone out to look at it, I've learned a little bit more. And I could sort of say in some ways I have failed to climb it, but that's not necessarily true, because in some ways mountaineering is about trying. Back to business, sometimes it's about trying, and people talk about failure, but I say no, you haven't failed, you've tried. But I suppose in some ways understanding the route, this is something we've talked about before as well. Sometimes people talk about the summit and getting to the summit, but really what you've got to do to get to the summit is understand the route you're going to take to the summit.
Absolutely.
And you've got to understand in your own head what it's going to be like. Is this going to be physically difficult? What kind of choices are you going to need to make along the way? And with something big like that, you always have a certain sense of apprehension. And one of the things I've learned to deal with apprehension is learn about what's ahead of you. And that's maybe talking to people who've done it before.
Yeah. So gathering from their experiences, and people with the arrow marks in their backs who've been there and done it.
Yeah, totally.
It's hugely important. And it's a really interesting point, Peter, about focusing on the summit and knowing exactly how to get there. And one of the things that we often find, and I've experienced on the mountain myself and with teams I've climbed with, and also in life and in business, is that we're so focused on the summit that we actually forget how beautiful the journey is along the way. And it's very much like, how far can we get today? How many kilometers can we get? How much altitude can we get? And so every now and again we need to just stop and say, okay, let's have a look back and admire the view. And I think your point is very valid, and something that we miss out on maybe in life and in business as well. And is there any other particular point that you've taken from your experience, Peter?
Well, one of the things I've talked about is this thing of, I think maybe 2 other things I'd like to say, Shay. One is this thing of maybe finding somebody to help you along the way. Sometimes we think we can go through life alone, and sometimes we think we can climb mountains alone. And I have done mountains and I have climbed mountains without getting a guide. But there are times that you need a guide. There are times that you need a guide to show you the way. And again, it's back to that thing of experience, that you need to have some sense of experience of what's ahead of you.
Yeah.
You can do that by talking to people who've done it, but there's no substitute for having somebody who's been there before. Some of the stuff I've done has been on rock, and it's on rock, it's actually quite easy to see where you're going and what you're doing and judge what's ahead of you. But if you go climbing on snow or mountaineering on snow, it's a different environment, and it's much more about knowing what's there, what's underneath, what's come before.
Completely.
And it's much more about knowing and understanding where the dangers around here. That's very difficult to judge as somebody who's just arrived in a location. But if you have a local guide, he'll say, no, this is liable to avalanche, this is dangerous. And it's bringing that expertise into your climbing or bringing that expertise into your business. I think that's terribly important.
Yeah, and life in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent, and it's a very good point and a good segue into, I suppose, one of the points I'd like to make about having a guide. And you know, even the most successful people in business, it doesn't matter who they are, and we could rattle off dozens of them that are billionaires and hugely successful, prominent dragons, etc., etc. None of them have done it alone, because nobody has. And of course, there's going to be a couple of mavericks or a couple of outliers that'll climb a mountain, you know, without ropes in Yosemite or somewhere like that. But the vast majority of people, no matter how successful they are and how much leadership they show, they haven't done it alone. They've got a team behind them.
Well, that's one of the things I like about venture, Shay. You bring that into venture all the time, that thing of building your team around you. That one of the reasons you set up venture, I think, was so you could find the right people and find the people to work with you in your business.
100%. And you know, I guess when prior to setting up venture 14 years ago, I spent decades working in corporate, kind of at senior management and director level, and with thousands in the company and maybe hundreds in the department. And one of the things, the advantage that I had was that no matter what I needed, whether it was legal advice, I had a legal in-house team. If I had a HR issue, I picked up the phone in the office across the way. There was a HR team there to support me, marketing team. You know, it didn't matter what I needed or what any of the managers needed. We had those resources within the corporate environment. And really, it was only when I stepped out into the world of, I suppose, become independent and enter the world of the SME, the small medium enterprise, that I realised that, you know, we as SME business owners, we don't have those resources available. And that was one of the key things for me for venture, was to bring together those resources, skills, expertise and experience that we could share with each other, and surround ourselves with, you know, a legal expert, a HR expert, a marketing expert, you know, a finance expert, and that's what we do. And it's exactly the same, or very similar on a mountain. If it's a big mountain, and if it's maybe a technical mountain, you need to have the resources and the skills with you. And what I mean by, so you need the technical resources if it's a technical mountain. You know, if there's rope climbing or you're using crampons and ice picks as we did, you need to have somebody that has that technical skills. There we go. Yeah, so you need a medic, you know, in case something goes wrong, and you need to fall back on somebody that has that expertise. You need somebody that's experienced in navigation, to make sure that you follow the direction that you've agreed in the path, and you don't, because it can be very dangerous on a mountain, and it can be dangerous in business as well. And you know, you need somebody that's familiar with the climate and that's monitoring the climate. And I've seen people lose their lives on mountains, as I'm sure you have as well, because they didn't anticipate what was going to happen down the road. And it's the same in business. It's the economic climate in business. You know, you have to be able to anticipate that, and having the right team around you with the skills and expertise, both on the mountain and in the office, is absolutely.
And I actually think it's the difference between small business, you know, unsuccessful businesses and successful businesses. Successful business owners realize they need to bring people in, realize that they can't do everything themselves. And I've seen that many times, business owners trying to do things themselves that they really don't have the expertise to do. And it's a difficult step sometimes to take, to say, no, somebody else knows better than me. But I think it's a really, really important step if you want to build a business. 100%.
And I'm happy to stand up and say, look, I don't have all the answers in marketing. I don't have all the answers in the legal requirements of a business or the IT, and I outsource practically everything and I have a great IT company that supports me. I have a great accountancy practice. I have a great legal firm, etc., etc. And yeah, I wouldn't be here without them. So.
Well, we also talked, Shay. I know we were talking about doing this chat, and you mentioned to me what should we talk about. And one of the things I think you've said from time to time is this thing of not really knowing what's coming. And I've been there, and you've been there. But maybe just tell us a little bit. I think you had an experience. Was it Carntool? You had a small but significant experience.
Oh, it's one of my favourites. Yeah, analogies. Yeah. Well, Carntool was probably the least, and many people that are in any way into outdoor adventure will have climbed Carntool. I've been there a few times, and I remember we were actually training for in 2010 to climb Kilimanjaro. There were a team of 17 of us, and we decided to go up the route, the Devil's Ladder. And for those who don't know it, it's a quite a steep ascent. It's basically in a gully, so you're funneling up.
I've climbed different route, but I've come down it at night. Yeah, so I know it well.
Fun.
Yeah.
It's fun, and yeah, we were probably halfway up this gully, if you like, in single file, and I just heard a scream. I was at the front, and Ian McKeever, who was with us at the time, was at the back, and I heard this shout from above, "Watch out!" and I saw this boulder, and it must have been, I'd say, at least a metre, if not more, in diameter. And it was bouncing from side to side in the gully, you know, and we didn't see it. Well, we eventually saw it coming, and we were able to take action. We were able to judge where it was going, and we were able to avoid it.
That's the problem. You can't always judge. You think it's going to go that way, but it goes that way.
Yeah. But it's but there's so many things that you need to watch out for on the mountain, and like when we climbed Mount Elbrus, and a lot of that was certainly on the summit. The couple of summit days, you're climbing with spikes, crampons, and it's on compacted ice. You'll actually see the water going under the ice like a river, and you know, you gotta and in Everest or you know, the Khumbu ice falls, you got to be prepared for a crevasse to open up in front of you, you know, and you got to, you know, have a plan B. Okay, well, this crevasse, we can't pass it. Can we get over it? Do we have the equipment to get across it? Or is there a route B and a route C? And it's the same in business, you know. The crevasse is waiting to happen, and we've seen it many times. The crevasse in the context of business could be suddenly a multinational arrives at your doorstep with huge resources and tries to take over your market and compete with you. That's a crevasse. Okay, so how do you deal with that? You got to be able to face that. And another crevasse could be a change in legislation and what you're doing, and you need to figure out how to you know, obviously.
Well, we got the COVID crevasse last year, Shay. Nobody saw that coming.
COVID was a huge crevasse, and absolutely it was a massive crevasse. And we talked about the skill sets and the expertise on the mountain in the business, and that's where climate comes in my opinion. You know, you got to really monitor the climate. We had 3 summit attempts on Mount Elbrus, and it's quite an unassuming, beautiful, quite an unassuming looking mountain. But the year before, 42 people lost their lives, and we made 3 summit attempts, and we had to turn back. And along the way, people were dropping off through primary exhaustion and altitude sickness. But the thing that turned us back was the climate. You know, we reached the saddle, and there were 70, 80 km/h winds, and we just had to say, okay, we got to stop this.
I was watching that set of DVDs that you loaned me a couple of weeks ago, Shay, and I don't know if you've seen that recently, but it's fascinating. It's about that guy, Russell Bryce, and he stops not on the top of Everest, but he stops on one of the calls in Everest, and he watches his climbers
through telescopes,
and he's judging. And I think that's a really important point about you know, judging the business and having somebody to look over your shoulder.
100%.
I made that point on a LinkedIn this morning. Having somebody to look over your shoulder and say, are you making the right decision? Do you have the resources to get to the summit? Are you on the right track to get to the summit? And are you making rational decisions? He actually says at one stage, you are not making rational decisions. And I've come across that recently in business as well, where somebody wasn't really making rational decisions. He said it to me, Peter, I wasn't making rational decisions. Never again.
No, I totally agree, and that couple of series on DVD is really, really interesting. It brings out a lot of the analogies that we've seen and experienced, and so watching individual performances and watching the direction they're going. But Russell also has a lot of equipment to manage the climate, and they're looking for that window of opportunity.
That's his speciality.
They're looking at that window of opportunity.
That is what he says is his speciality. Okay, guys. That's his secret weapon.
It is, yeah.
The weather.
Absolutely.
He says he pays a lot for it, but he doesn't say how much, but I'd say he pays a lot for his opportunities.
Constantly watching and communicating to him and say, okay guys, it looks like at 3 a.m., 3:15 a.m. tomorrow morning we have a window, we've got 8 hours to get up to the summit, and get back down again. So get yourselves ready, get geared up. So the climate is huge, and having that, being prepared, but being prepared for the weather to change, and that, I think that's what COVID did. You know, it came out of nowhere, and it had a huge impact on our economic climate, and I guess it was you know, those people that were anticipating something happening, and were able to adjust to the changed climate, that are still standing today and still thriving. So absolutely. So, you know, we at the time, before we even heard about it, we were looking at some of our members were looking at video conferencing solutions, because we wanted to integrate it to our face-to-face meetings. So when this actually happened and it was lockdown, within a week we were live online. And it's just trying to, and we were very, very lucky. It's just trying to anticipate what's coming in, and having plan B.
That's about looking ahead and seeing the route ahead of you.
100%.
You know, and that's about having a set of binoculars. I used to go climbing in Dalkey Quarry, and there was an old guy who used to go around and look at the climbs, and he'd take a set of binoculars out and he'd look at it and he'd look at the route in detail. But again, it's back to that Russell Bryce analogy, seeing what's ahead, looking at it from a distance.
Watching your direction.
Sometimes when you're climbing a mountain, it's there, it's in front of you. You think this is the right way, you think this is the way that looks the easiest, but somebody back, half a mile back, looking at you through a telescope will say, no, Shay, no, you don't go left, you go right. It might look harder, but it'll get easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many times I've seen that. I remember many years ago, I've climbed, and so have you, I've climbed Lugnaquilla. It's one of my least favourite mountains in the country, I have to say. It has never brought me any joy.
No, but it's a bit, I won't say it's drab, but it's flat. There's no
it's
there's
flat,
no rock,
and it's
there's no
exposed,
rock,
and every time I've gone and done it, somehow the weather's caused. But I remember one time there was a team was went up, and there were a couple of lads that had been nominated as guys that apparently knew the place very, very well, and we took their lead, and we went up, and before we got to the summit, and Lugnaquilla has a habit of doing this, the weather turned horrifically bad, and it was like a hurricane coming in with rain. You could barely see, 6 feet ahead of you, and like the jackets and backpacks were being blown off our backs, etc. So we stopped, and we took some water nourishment, and then we said, okay, we got to get out of here. We got to make it down. So the guys headed off, and maybe there was 8 or 10 of us. We started to follow, but something wasn't right. Something didn't feel right. Unfortunately, one of us, I won't say who it was, but one of us happened to put their GPS on their phone, and
I wonder who. Shay.
Won't name names, but had a look, and we were going completely the wrong direction, and we were only minutes away from the edge, going over the edge, and we wouldn't have seen it. We would have straight down.
No, I know what you mean. I've been stuck up there at night. I don't know if that was my time shot. I was stuck up there in the mist at night. And it is a dangerous place to be. Sometimes people think Irish mountains aren't dangerous. That mountain is dangerous.
Oh yeah.
And I have seen it not once. I've seen it a couple of times where the weather changes. Middle of July, I think I was walking down in Lugnaquilla. I was at the bottom of. I was halfway up, top of the Devil's Ladder. I met a crowd of Dublin lads, tracksuits, runners. They said, "Where's the top?" And I said, "Okay, up that way, guys." And we met them, I suppose, about 40-50 minutes later, being taken off by mountain rescue.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah, it happens all the time. You see a lot of it on social media as well. Appeals to people not to go unprepared, not to have a plan, not to have the right gear. You have to have the right gear. You got to have the right nourishment. You got to keep hydrated and waters. But some people just take a look and say, we'll give it
easy.
We'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that on the mountain. Doesn't work like that in life, and it doesn't work like that in business.
Be professional. Yeah, be professional.
Yeah.
I come back to that. Be professional. What you do it and do it once and do it right.
Yeah. So, well, that's great. I think it's probably one of many that we're going to be doing.
Absolutely,
Peter.
sure. Yeah.
And what we'd like to do, and we've discussed this, Peter, is there are plenty of people within the Venture Network and within our own separate networks outside that have had amazing experiences in different environments, and we're business owners, but also have had incredible adventures, sailed around the world. And
I'm going to second that. Say I have my eye on a couple of people in Venture who might be willing to talk to us.
Yeah.
A couple of people in Venture, a couple of people outside Venture who have had adventures, who have had challenges and adventures, and it's not necessarily a huge challenge, but challenge to you. Maybe it's meant something to you, and maybe we can bring that in and relate that back to business for everybody. Absolutely.
That's why we call it Venture. You just put the ad in front of it.
We call it Adventure.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Shay. Nice talking to you.
Thanks.